Now, we talked about the idea of grammar rules. So if I want to teach a student the rules of the word by, how long would it take to teach a student each individual sentence rule of the word by? By is followed by a noun, by is preceded by a verb, unless the verb is describing an action, in which case it takes the past participle. So a number of rules of by will actually become confusing. And instead, the pattern grammar says to students, collect examples of, for example, verb plus by. So collect your data first. Don't start with the rule, but look for the data. Okay? Clear-ish so far? Just people. So, this should move up, shouldn't it? Does this move? So essentially we go, I'm going to move this up now, and then go, no, I'm not, because I don't know how to. It doesn't. I'll have to stand and be tall. I'm not tall. Oh, never mind. Lighting up the air. The next question, and this is maybe important for students, of what is the role of grammar? Why do we need it? So a lot of people say, well, we don't need grammar. Okay? Or maybe we do. So, my daughter is now 6 years old. So I have had a 6-year case study of grammar development. And it's interesting being a teacher and then being a parent that I've seen my daughter's grammar emerge without any explicit teaching. And there are lots of examples that show from especially children's speak why grammar becomes important. So, this is an example of a telegraphic statement by a child. Daddy, pen. Okay? So, how many different meanings can you think of for this sentence?
I want.
Yeah, anything else? Give me a pen.
There's a pen.
Yeah, there's a pen.
Is that a pen?
Oh, that's Daddy's pen. So, at telegraphic level, the meaning is not clear. Daddy pen doesn't give me enough information. I have to kind of, and I've been through this with my daughter. Daddy pen, you want the pen? And I have to go through a series of questions to find out what message my daughter is giving me. As her grammar develops, the number of ambiguities decrease. We start to go, all right, she said, Daddy, pen please. Okay? So, when we look at the pattern grammar, she develops the pen please grammatical form. She doesn't say please pen. So she develops, and that's a grammatical, she gets that idea of not a sentence, but a phrase grammar. Daddy, pen please. Daddy, Hannah, pen. So there's no possessive, but she understands that Hannah comes before pen. So she develops pattern grammar first. As pattern grammar emerges, she starts to add words together. She makes mistakes, she tries things out. But you start to see grammar emerging from the bottom up rather from me teaching a grammar rule. Okay? So this is a good kind of child example. But I'd like you to think about a student example. Most of my students don't say Daddy pen. Fortunately, I'd be a bit confused, I'd be a bit worried if they did. Okay, so a much more Japanese example. So now I have the phrase, I no go karaoke. Okay? So I suppose that's with the person next to you, I think of how many different possible sentences do you think come from this? At the moment we don't really know what the student is trying to say. There's not really enough information. So with the person next to you, can you try to think of 4 different possible sentences that come from I no go karaoke? Okay?
We're just hearing this. We're just hearing this. We're listening to the student.
Yeah, and you're trying to work out, okay, what might that student mean?
I don't want to go.
Like, understand that.
But if you don't read, like,
I can't go.
I won't go to karaoke.
Oh, you don't?
I didn't go.
Ah, yeah, I didn't go.
Okay, I'll stop you there. So, we'll go around. Can you give one example from here?
I can go karaoke.
So I can't go to karaoke. Anything else? Yeah.
I don't want to go.
I don't want to go.
I never.
I don't go. I don't go to karaoke.
I don't want to go to karaoke, or I don't go to karaoke. So different messages. So we start to think, but in the conversation that would be clear. Okay? But no, no. So imagine the conversation. I say to someone, "Oh, do you want to go to karaoke?" I no go karaoke. Is that clear yet? Still not clear. I can't go. I don't go. I don't want to go. I've never been to karaoke, so I don't know what you're talking about. So even in the conversation, with the context, we still don't understand the message. And a lot of communicative classrooms, we look at the message, not the grammar. But sometimes separating them, we forget that the grammar is actually part of the message. Or, unfortunately, often by focusing on the grammar, we ignore the message in order to focus on a particular rule. So highlighting these for students is important. That students need to know that grammar is important. Not by drilling them 100 times, but by letting them see this sentence doesn't communicate your message. Therefore, if you don't change it, you won't be understood. And that's kind of the first step to starting to shift their internal grammar to something better. Okay? So that's the first set of role. The second, so you got kind of clarity. Okay? There's also economy. Low-level ungrammatical speech becomes very long and very clumsy. Okay? And a very good example is students hate reported speech, generally speaking, especially people in Oita. Can anyone tell me how to form reported speech in Oita? You say the sentence, you don't change anything, and then you write chi at the end. It's incredibly easy. My first experience was actually my roommate was Japanese. The phone went, he answered the phone, and he went, "Michael Kunch." I was stumped. What? My grammar book said "konai to iteimashita," but in it that became "kunch." So I wonder if that has an effect that sometimes Japanese students kind of go, "Indoksai." He said he had. But what I find is I often get students acting out conversations, and it's really frustrating. They get a kind of, I met my friend and I said, "How are you?" and he said, "I'm okay," and then I said, "Let's go to the shops," and then he said, "Oh my God, I'm going to die here." So, and during the middle of the conversation, especially when there's 3 people, I'm lost as to who's talking to who about what. And the problem is grammar. The context is clear, their vocabulary is okay, but they're avoiding the grammar form that would make it neat. So I did an experiment. This is a listening test, only because I don't have PowerPoint. Okay? So I like to listen to the kind of ungrammatical sentence. Then with the person next, you try and change this into a shorter sentence using a better level of grammar. Okay, so it's going to be listening and grammar approach, okay, which is also a good classroom technique. Okay, so the original sentence is, I said, "Do you want to go to the cinema?" And he said, "Yes, I do." Then I said, "Let's go to T-Joy." Okay, would you like to hear that one more time? Okay, so I said, "Do you want to go to the cinema?" And he said, "Yes, I do." Then I said, let's go to T-joint. Okay? So anyways, I like to try and reduce that down to a shorter sentence, keeping the all of the original meaning. One sentence. One sentence.
I said,
I asked him to go to T-joint. Yes, I read.
oh, Simon, Christopher.
Yes.
He said,
I said, do you want to go to the cinema? And he said, yes, I do. And then I said, let's go to T-joint.
There's lots of movies. Maybe I asked him.
Yeah, I asked for the
Do you want to go to the cinema?
But that's another lesson.
Yeah, that's
I asked if he wanted to go to the cinema. He agreed.
Okay, so in the interest of time, again, I prepared my own version with blue teacher style. Okay, so it is to compare, again, this is an important thing for teaching students, is whenever you give a model, make it very clear that that's all it is. Actually, I did this experiment with my wife. She's very unlucky living with me, because I do these things. So I asked my wife to do this, and she came up with a very different sentence to mine. Which was actually interesting, because she just chose another grammar form. Perfect sentence. When she saw my example, she started to change it to what I'd written. She had to point out, no, what she had done was great. It was just different. And again, one of the problems of especially students coming from a school grammar system is anything they produce will be compared to the teacher's production or the textbook. And if it's different, they often assume different is incorrect. Often even when it may be nearly correct, which is just as good. So my example, I've written down on the other piece of paper, so I look really stupid. So I asked him if he wanted to go to the cinema. He said yes, so I suggested T-joint. Yes. That have been combined. So see, you're all going, that's two sentences. No, it's two clauses combined, therefore it's one sentence. But another part of it, again, this is the other thing about grammar syntax. Students often assume that a long sentence is a single unit. This is why pattern grammar says no, it's not. A long sentence is a series of units joined together. And that's all it is. So students often fail to see how the units can be moved around. And they think it must stay in that shape. And then students often then default back to, all right, what's the shortest sentence I can make? Okay? So the original sentence was 24 words. The modified sentence was 19 words, right, which is a 20% decrease in length. It's also much clearer. The message comes out faster. When you include more participants in the conversation, it becomes much easier to tag. I asked John if he wanted to go to the cinema, and he said he had to phone Dave first. These things become much clearer with a smaller number of words. And most students like to use fewer words. The economy of laziness. I don't want to use 100 words if I can use 2. So again, trying to show students that the economy is good for them can help to structure the grammar. Okay? The last one is there's the grammar of distance. Has anyone read any of Scott Thornbury's books? If not, you should, particularly the Longman ones.
If not, they have the sample books at the
No,
next lab.
actually, I have to point out, for people who read Japanese, one of the raffle prizes is Scott Thornbury's How to Teach Grammar book. One of his, he talks about the idea of the grammar of distance, that there are 2 kinds of distance. One is physical distance. So when there's no physical distance between 2 people, very little grammar is needed. Okay? So you actually, in the coffee shop over there, okay, you can walk up to the girls and say, coffee. With one word, the message is very clear. There's no physical distance, therefore grammar is unnecessary. Imagine though that I'm upstairs and I'm working on the computer, and my wife is downstairs, and she shouts, "Coffee!" What's the message? Or coffee's ready, or where's the
Maybe just
coffee?
spilled the coffee.
Yeah, Hannah's just spilt the coffee. Where's the coffee? Yeah, maybe she wants me to make the coffee. So the physical distance means we need grammar. The wider the distance gets, the more grammar is needed. If I'm in the office and I telephone my wife and go, "Hi, coffee," it's now useless. The message then becomes, "Do you want me to buy some coffee at Jazzco on my way home?" So grammar becomes important. And in the classroom, often we don't do that. We tend to go, right, just do this example. And there's no idea, right, why is it necessary? So lots of students practice the wrong kind of grammar. Two friends in the kitchen going, "Hello, would you like some of this coffee?" "Yes, I'd like some of that coffee." "Would you like some of this sugar in your coffee?" Then there's the idea of psychological reality. What does the student think about the language? And I think a lot of students in the unrealistic conversation is going, "Eigo mendokusai. Nande kore iwanna ikenno?" And they think they have to produce that. The English is somehow different to Japanese. So they get a negative image. We're practicing the wrong thing. In the short physical distance, let them practice natural language. Then let them see how it changes. The second distance is social distance. Okay? So, Stephen is very unlucky, he's known me for a long time. So I could just say, "Stephen, shut the door, will you?" No problem. Relationship allows me to use "shut the door." No extra grammar is needed other than a single telegraphic sentence. Okay? But somebody I've never met before, I can't do that. I can't just go, "Shut the door." I'm now being rude. So grammar is now necessary. I need to add more components to my sentence so that I'm now using the correct social distance. Again, textbooks often fail to do this. They don't show how language changes between different participles. This is a very easy thing to introduce in the classroom. If you have any textbook conversation, ask your students to rewrite it using different participants. If it's casual, ask them to change it to a stranger. If it's two strangers, ask them to change it to two friends. And by doing that, the students start to see grammar emerging from a conversation rather than it being imposed down from the teacher. So we're developing a sense of grammar as such rather than a kind of static image of this is what you must learn. Okay? The final question is, does grammar have rules? Okay, now this is a horrible minefield. The answer is no. Can anybody give me a rule for will and going to in less than 13 pages? The answer would be no. And even if you look at the most common simplified rule, will is for decisions that have just been made. The phone's ringing, oh, I'll get it. Going to is for things I've planned. Okay? So that seems like a good rule, until you look at it in action. And you see examples like in a restaurant, two people are looking at the menu, the waiter comes over and goes, "Can I help you?" "Yeah, I'll have the steak." That's wrong. The decision was made before the conversation. So surely, under our grammar rule, it should be, "What would you like?" "I'm going to have the steak. I've decided already." I looked at the menu, I made my decision, and 10 minutes later the waiter came. The rule doesn't stand up to scrutiny, usually. It helps to understand a rough difference. But if it's only read Michael Swan's Practical English Usage. That's 13 pages on will versus going to. So you're saying the students have to go through 13 pages of rules and then find out that when they practice them and they hear natural speech, a lot of the rules will be broken. So I remember when I started learning Japanese, my Japanese grammar book lied to me. Did. Barefaced lie. So Japanese has two tenses. Okay? You use mas for present, mashita for past. Masen for negative. Easy. Thanks Japan, great, lovely language, I like it a lot, much better than English. And then I start to find that that's not true. There's all sorts of extra rules and permutations, and learning a list of rules doesn't help you. Right? But starting to see patterns emerging is more beneficial. In this example, it's a good idea to use this. If anyone is feeling really crazy, there's a very good video talk on Scott Thornbury's blog where he actually argues that essentially grammar doesn't exist. And if you watch it, it's actually quite interesting that you go, but I'm not going to go into that too much because I like to go into the kind of practical side of grammar. Okay, so we have an idea of what we want to get across. We need to understand what's the role of grammar, why is grammar important? The ambiguity becomes reduced. Social relationships are shown by grammar. So then we have grammar teaching approaches. So the traditional grammar approach was grammar translation. Okay? Does anybody think that grammar translation is a good teaching method? If you do so, please put your hand up. Okay.
Can be.
So, yes. It's interesting actually. I was lucky in December last year, sorry, I was in Fukuoka. And I went to see Paul Nation. And it was interesting that he talked about grammar translation and what a wonderful method it is. And one of the problems with teachers is we tend to throw out everything when we change something. The communicative approach came in. No, grammar translation is evil. Nobody learned languages before communicative teaching. But as we know, that's wrong. The extremes of grammar translation were dull. But there's no reason why translation doesn't help students to structure their internal grammar in a second language. The important thing is in grammar translation is we highlight the similarities and the differences. So as a very easy method of actually letting students see the language, just ask your students to write a short, very short paragraph for example, in English. Pass that to the next group who have to translate that into Japanese. Take the Japanese translation, give it to another group, and have them translate it into English. Then compare the original to the second stage translation. What happens is then students start to see the differences in it. What grammar forms are different from the original piece to the double translated piece. You can go through, first of all, are there errors? Is the first question. The second one, if there are no errors, what are the differences? So again, we look at patterns of grammar. This student translated this sentence this way. It's correct. This one did it this way. It's also correct. So students get a sense that there's not one answer. We have lots of different ways of making a particular idea in English. Okay, there are the PPP, presentation, practice, production model. Does anyone use PPP method in their classes? It's not like Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like PPP Anonymous. There's actually on last year's JALT journal, there's a very interesting article comparing the role of task-based learning and the PPP model in Japanese classrooms. And one of the things they talk about, and this is mentioned a lot, is the PPP model is not bad. I can say this now. It's good. One of the problems is the final P is missing. It's a PP method. Or in some teachers, it's P. Junior high school I worked at depended on the teacher. One of the teachers was very good and it was very much PPP. The other one was P. 40 minutes of presentation and then maybe an exercise for homework. So that essentially, the students don't develop their